So I learned a couple new things this week. One of them is that the melanin in my skin grants me superhuman powers. The other is that whiteness is defined by what I thought human nature was. Nick Cannon goes on a racist rant on his podcast, and the African American History Museum has a lot to say about what constitutes whiteness and white culture. Let's get into it. So Nick Cannon, on his podcast this week, Nick Cannon shared his thoughts and feelings about skin pigmentation, melanin, and how he ultimately felt that black people are superior to white people, even when it's low to say that white people are lesser, they're more barbaric, they're savages. What I find really interesting about this is how he depicts melanin. He goes on a rant about what melanin does, what melanin is, what melanin consists of, what it makes us do. It sounds a lot like Black Panther's heart-shaped herb. I mean, if I had any idea that melanin did all these things for me, I would have became a superhuman sooner. Let's look at the clip of Nick Cannon's racist rant against white people and how melanin makes us superior.
Let's go to what it really is then. When we talk about the power of melanated people, when we talk about who we really are as guys and understanding that our melanin is so powerful and it connects us in a way that the reason why they fear black, the reason why they fear is because the lack that they have of it.
Melanin gives us power. It connects us in a way that I can't quite understand. I mean, I don't know any super mystical or spiritual elements to my psyche that have resulted because of the melanin that I have in my skin. And the fact that he would even say, you know what kills me, you know what gets on my nerves? The dude sitting here beside him talking about, right. Like he's really speaking unfalsifiable fact. Yeah. This is utter nonsense. The reason why they fear black people is because of the lack of melanin that they have. Can someone please inform Nick that white people, black people, even albinos, we have the same amount of melanocytes in our skin. It's just the environment that causes the melanocytes to release certain amounts of melanin that result in darker pigmentation.
You see what Dr. Francis C. Welsing talked about is that fear and that
just genetic annihilation,
that deficiency of when you have a person that has the lack of pigment, the lack of melanin, that they know that they will be annihilated.
Genetic annihilation. How many white people out there are concerned with this concept of genetic annihilation? How many of you white people out there are conspiring to get rid of black people because you think black people can rid the human race of the white phenotype? This is a really interesting conspiracy theory. Of course, they have no objective way of confirming that this is true. There's no scientific study, no research, no empirical data on anything that concludes any of this bullshit. So I'm asking you white people, how many of you are in agreement with this? How many of you can confirm what Nick is saying? Are you afraid of genetic annihilation?
So therefore, however they got the power, they have the lack of compassion. That melanin comes with compassion.
And melanin coming with compassion. Really? I'm compassionate because of melanin? I don't want to sound too offensive, but here in America, black people seem to have the least amount of compassion that I've ever seen. By far, white people exhibit a lot more compassion than what I've seen black people exhibit. Where's the compassion when 50% of the violent crime is coming from 6% of the population? Where's that compassion? Where's all this melanated compassion when there's black on black violence? A difference in opinion. Where's the compassion? Where's the respect?
Melanin comes with soul that we call it. We call it soul. We soul brothers and sisters.
We call it soul. That's what we call it. We call it soul. It connects us. It connects us in a way that makes us commit 53% of the violent crime. It connects us in a way where we have the highest rates of homicide amongst each other. It connects us. Oh yeah, it definitely connects us.
That's the melanin that connects us.
Right.
So the people that don't have it are a little, and I'm gonna say this carefully, are a little less.
And for those of you who aren't aware of what racism actually looks like the definition of racist, the definition of racism, Nick Cannon is exemplifying the definition of racism by saying that white people are a little less. They're barbaric. They're savages. That is the definition of racism. You see, a lot of people love calling everything racist. And the majority of the time here in America, anything that's a difference in opinion is racist. Any interaction between a white person and a black person that's negative is predicated on racism. Forget all the other possible variables that could factor into why the interaction occurred. It's predicated on racism. It's attributable to racism. But this is the definition of racism.
And where the term actually comes from, because I'm bringing it all the way back around to Minister Farrakhan, to where they may not have the compassion or the when they were sent to the mountains of Caucasus, when they didn't have the power of the sun, that the sun then started to deteriorate them.
What the hell is Nick talking about? What is he talking about? And his reference is Louis Farrakhan, one of the most infamous black supremacists there are. When they went to the mountains of Caucasus and they didn't receive the power of the sun, and the sun started to deteriorate them, white people have melanin. Melanin does not grant you superhuman powers. It does not grant you mystical powers. It does not connect you and give you soul. Melanin doesn't do any of this shit.
So then they're acting out of fear. They're acting out of low self-esteem. They're acting out of a deficiency. So therefore, the only way that they can act is evil.
Acting out of fear, low self-esteem, they're acting out of deficiency. So the only way that they can act, therefore, is evil. Fear of what? Low self-esteem of what? A deficiency of what? Melanin is not a vitamin. They're not deficient of anything. Melanin is not a mineral. They're not deficient in anything. If I heard this as a white person, this would piss me the hell off. If a white person said anything like this about black people, and Nick did get fired, Viacom fired him, but if a white person said anything like this about black people, they would be scrutinized, ostracized. Their life would be in flames.
The only way they have to rob, steal, rape, kill, and
fight or flight, okay,
in order to survive.
Exactly.
So
since the dawn of humanity, human beings have engaged in killing, stealing, raping, conquering in order to survive. Since the dawn of humanity, this is not attributable to one distinct race. This happened in Asia, Europe, Africa, the New World. This is not exclusive to white people. This is human nature. This is how human beings behave. We see it today in America. white people aren't the ones with the highest rates of stealing and killing. What people like Nick seem to forget is that you say things like this and then you can observe the opposite happening. So if that's the case, if that's reality, if these are facts, if this is science, then why is it that we see the complete opposite happening in certain demographics, in certain areas, in certain countries? Slavery still exists in Africa today. There's a lot of stealing, killing, raping, beating, and conquering going on in those countries. Those are not white people. You see, when you say foolish things like this type of stuff is easy to refute by simple observation.
Then these people who didn't have what we had, and when I say we, I speak of the melanated people.
Right.
They had to be savages. They had to be barbaric. Because they're in these Nordic mountains. They're in these rough, torrential environments. So they're acting as animals.
Right.
So they're the ones that are actually closer to animals. They're the ones that are actually the true savages. And then they built up such this I don't want to say warrior, but they built up such this conquering barbaric mentality.
The ideology of racism was literally predicated on the nonsense that Nick Cannon is spewing. White supremacists, KKK members, black supremacists, pro-blacks, two wings on the same bird. Scientific creationism, scientific racism. Fallacious, indoctrinated ideologies. No scientific validity. They misconstrue what science has shown, and they redact and leave out other information that the articles and the studies have concluded, all to make themselves appear more superior, because it makes us feel good. That's what we want to believe. Who wouldn't want to believe that the group you identify with is superior to all other groups? It's asinine to allow content like this to be played, to be spewed, and to be forgiven. Because it's not even the fact that Nick was fired because he said this. He was fired because of some anti-Semitic statements that he made about black people being the original Hebrews. So as far as Viacom was concerned, these remarks, they were going to let those slide. They didn't fire him because he made these remarks. But racism is racism because the definition of it is the idea that one race is superior to another. So any race can be racist. That's racism. You can't have a race and they're excluded from racism. This is racism. I guess Nick, Minister Farrakhan, and whatever other pro-blacks, whoever is along in this movement, this idea of scientific creationism, this idea of scientific racism, this fallacious indoctrination, they're scientifically illiterate. They aren't aware of the real literature, the real research, the real empirical data. They're ignorant in the field of genetics. They don't understand that there's only one race, and that's the human race. And no race is superior to any other. And then there was another thing I wanted to get into. The African American Museum came up with this idea of what whiteness consists of, what white culture includes. And I was astounded that they would even put anything like this out, because as I said, anytime someone makes a theory, you can observe whether this theory is valid. Look at what the African American Museum said about white culture and what whiteness is.
Aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance, independence, and autonomy highly valued and rewarded. Individuals assume control of their environment. You get what you deserve. Family structure. The nuclear family, father, mother, 2.3 children is the ideal social unit. Husband is the breadwinner and head of household. Wife is homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Children should have own rooms, be independent. Emphasis on scientific method. Objectional, rational, linear thinking, cause and effects relationship. Quantitative emphasis. History, based on Northern European immigrants' experience in the United States. Heavy focus on the British Empire. The primacy of Western, Greek, Roman, and Judeo-Christian tradition. Protestant work ethic. Hard work is the key to success. Work before you play. If you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. Religion, Christianity is the norm. Anything other than Judeo-Christian tradition is foreign. No tolerance for deviation from single God concept. Status, power, and authority. Wealth equals worth. Your job is who you are. Respect authority. Heavy value on ownership of goods, space, property. Future orientation, plan for future. Delayed gratification. Progress is always best. Tomorrow will be better. Time. Follow rigid time schedules. View time as commodity. Aesthetics, based on European culture. Steak and potatoes. Bland is best. Women's beauty is based on blonde, thin Barbie. Man's attractiveness is based on economic status, power, and intellect. Holidays based on Christian religions, based on white history and male leadership. Justice is based on English common law. Protect property and entitlements. Intent counts. Competition. Be number one. Win at all costs. Win or lose a dichotomy. Action orientation. Mastering control of nature. Must always do something about a situation. Aggressiveness and extroversion. Decision making. Majority rules. When whites have power. Now, the African American Museum has since taken this chart down, but I find it funny how these are all attributes attributable to whiteness. This is white culture. Or complete nonsense. Anyone with a functioning brain knows that you matter first and foremost. If you can't rely on yourself first, how are you going to rely on anyone else? Everyone's not going to live your life for you. No one's going to give you anything. Self-reliance is extremely important. These are things that are not attributable to just whiteness. These are values that human beings should have. These are values that successful individuals should have. The nuclear family unit, that's important. Do you know what happens when there's a father absent from the household? You know, the likelihood of everything negative that a child can actually go through increases. How is the nuclear family white culture? How is the competitive aspect of human nature white culture? Everybody wants to succeed. A lot of people want to be the best. Everyone wants to overachieve. This stuff is ridiculous. This is common sense. These are white traits. This is white culture. Objective, rational, linear thinking. Cause and effect relationships. That's white culture. So we're basically saying that being intelligent, being logical, being rational, being objective, understanding that there's correlation and causation for the phenomena that occur in the world is white thinking. Well, I guess that explains why there are really no minorities in scientific fields. And I guess you can also say that's why the scientific field makes the most money. That is literally the only way to approach science. Objective, rational, cause and effect, correlations, causations, relationships. There's no other way to make a reliable, valid, scientific claim without having proof or evidence to support what you think is reality. Let me ask my white followers, what do you guys think? Do you guys think this is white culture? Well, I'll tell you what, if it's white culture, then I identify as whiteness. Because I call this success culture. These are the values and the principles that anyone and everyone who's trying to be successful should have. And the individuals who don't, maybe they'd be more successful if they incorporated these values and these principles into their psyche, into their belief system, into their value system. You gotta wonder, if this is white culture, then what is blackness? What is black culture? Everything that's the complete opposite. Emotional, tribalism. They value the nuclear family. We value single motherhood. They're objective. We're subjective. I guess we all just need participation trophies. We don't want to be the best. We don't want to achieve. We're not in competition. Blackness is also compassion. We're interconnected.
and spiritual, and we enlighten one another and we lift up one another because we're the almighty race. There's a lot of moronic fuckery going on in America right now. I say that every day. And at this point, nothing surprises me. And it's just going to continue to get worse and worse. Racial tensions are high. Maybe it's because it's an election year. The amount of contradictions and hypocrisy and the degree of distortion that is plaguing the Americas at this point in time is mind-boggling. There's really nothing else I can say. There's nothing else I can do but continue to help educate and help those who are willing to listen and those who already know and those who want to understand that the path we're headed on right now, trying to find this egalitarian utopia, will result in nothing more than a nightmare and a dystopia. Over and out.